Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to pass this day in peace. Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to come to church this morning and to praise to you and receive your body and blood. Heavenly Father, thank you for opening the doors of the church again, giving us the opportunity to serve in all our various services again. Heavenly Father, please, during this week, please be with us and guide us and keep us far from sin and help us to perform your will. Amen.
Inseparable the Bible of the Virgin Saint Mary who in Christ, you saying, Our Father in heaven, hallowed.
Thy will be done on earth as it is. Give us this day our daily temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Pray to you.
Andrew wants to do I kneel and pray to you. What? That's what he said. I don't know if we have that one. Do whatever. Which one did we do last time? Was that so long? We did this. Whatever we did last week was so long.
Not me. Okay, guys, we're going to sing I Praise My Soul. The lyrics on the screen. Join in. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I place my soul into your hands, my Lord Jesus Christ. Lead me 'cause I depend on you. Lead me and I'll serve you. Please be my guide in every way. Be my God, I won't go astray. Sanctify my heart and my needs until I see you, Lord. As you have always said, O source of all goodness, as you have always said, O source of all goodness, come unto me, all you weary, come unto me and you'll find rest. Come unto me, I am the way, I am the truth and life. When my life gets filled with worries and darkness overwhelms, the clouds will be dispersed away by you, O Prince of Peace. You are my shield, you are my hope, you are my strength, you are my goal. You are the perfect love, O Lord, of whom then shall I be? As you have always said, O source of all goodness, as you have always said, O source of all goodness, come unto me, all you weary, come unto me, and you'll find rest. Come unto me, I am the way, I am the truth and light. You are my shepherd, I'll not want. Lead me to still waters. Restore my soul, I am calling you. Lead me to righteousness. Though I walk through the death valley, with you I will fear no evil. You are my comfort, staff and rod. All the days of my life, as you have always said, O source of all goodness, as you have always said, O source of all goodness, come unto me, all you weary, come unto me, and you'll find rest. Come unto me, I am the way, I am the truth and life.
Welcome everyone. Lovely to see so many faces this week. Before we get started on our main talk, we're blessed to have Chris McGalley giving us a pre-talk on grit. Please make him feel welcome.
Hello. I had a presentation, but I'll just explain what's on the screen. So the topic that I have today is something called grit. I personally never knew, and I thought it was a spelling mistake when I got sent the topic. So basically what grit is just passion and perseverance for long-term goals. So I have like a little scale thing that goes all the way to the top, but it goes up and down until it goes to the top. Life is never the same, always goes up and down. If we think life is good, we always think it's going to be good, but if we think life is bad, then life will always be bad. Okay, don't bother. So the first thing I want to talk about is anxiety. So actually, I shouldn't have said that, but if you search up most commonly diagnosed mental condition, what do you think will come up? You got it. Around 20% of the population, including me, suffer from anxiety every year. But how do you think in this world anxiety is managed? Like the people in this world, what do you think? Medication, yeah? Yeah. So people turn to drugs. Sometimes the doctor can prescribe medication, but the only thing makes things worse. And we ourselves use drugs, maybe not medical, but we use the drug of distraction. We use the drug of food, the drug of music, the drug of being addicted to your phone, maybe socializing with a group of people, just for distractions, and it's only just to cope with your anxiety. It never really helps. We use it as an escape. We like to use distractions as an escape, but you can never escape your way to fulfillment. You can never escape your way to joy or peace or love. And all these distractions probably make it worse. So something to keep in mind when we're anxious is grit, because when we have grit, it's the perseverance when you face obstacles, when you face anxiety. We all go through anxiety in our lives, but it's most important how we react to anxiety or uncomfortable times. So we use grit, setting a goal. That's what grit is, setting a goal and sticking to the goal until you achieve it, no matter your ups and downs in life. I had a friend in school. By the way, grit, the desire to succeed, has nothing to do with how smart you are, or how attractive you are, or anything like that. It's just perseverance and your passion for your goals. So I had a friend in school who wasn't really the smartest and was always mucked around. We were in year 11, and he did really poorly in year 11 in maths, so he got forced to drop. So obviously he's feeling, I'm going to fail. I just got dropped I failed year 11, I'm going to drop. I just got dropped. And that same guy got the ducks of the school. The same guy that always mucked around. And I asked him, like, how the heck did you get the ducks of the school? And he said that he just had the desire to succeed. He didn't care about what anyone thought. All his friends were in the class higher than him, but he just persevered, and he didn't care what anyone thought. I have a quote here. In order to reach your goals, you're going to have to learn how to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Okay? So when you go through tough times or confronting times in your life, you can be afraid. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be uncomfortable, but you should learn how to go ahead anyway. Doesn't matter how hurt you are. You continue anyway. You continue your goals anyway. You're going to get disappointed. You're going to get dirt on you. It's like fail. Fail is like dirt. But what happens when you throw a seed on concrete? It doesn't grow. But what happens when you throw seed to dirt and you put more dirt on it? The seed will grow and flourish. And we are like that seed. We need the dirt. We need the fail so we can succeed. Dirt is like the fertilizer for the seed to grow. We need dirt to develop. We need to be uncomfortable. We need to fail and continue anyway. That's what a greedy person will do. They will fail, but they will continue anyway. So the key to grit is gratitude. So always be thankful. And the reason why, because even if you succeeded all your goals, if you have $1 billion and you lived your life every day annoyed and frustrated, then your quality of life will be annoyed and frustrated, and you didn't really succeed in anything. And to accomplish and to maintain your goals, you have to always be thankful, because do you really think if you're financially successful and lived annoyed and pissed off every day, you can maintain your success? You can't maintain your success for long. And just to conclude, I have a verse actually from the Wisdom of Sirach. God always puts us in tough situations. He puts us in tough situations so we can strive against the resistance. It's like when someone goes to the gym, they go through resistance so the muscle gets bigger. It's exactly like us. God puts us through resistance so we can push against resistance and grow bigger. To consider any Bible character in the Bible, consider the generations of old and see, has anyone trusted in the Lord and been disappointed? Or has anyone persevered in the fear of the Lord and been forsaken? Or has anyone called upon him and been neglected? For the Lord is compassionate and merciful. He forgives sins and saves in time of distress. Just to conclude, grit is to persevere and to have passion for your goals, to always be thankful, and to always put God in the picture, and glory be to God for the moment.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was great. And I think we're going to see how grit will also play into our topic for today. I think Abuna has just stepped out for a second, but I'll introduce the topic anyway, and then maybe we can sing a hymn if he isn't back. So our theme for this will be our second week, is who do we rely on? And so we started this series talking about materialistic reliance, and we had Yusuf leading us through that. And today we'll continue the series with divine reliance, and Father Paul will be taking us through this concept of divine reliance and what that entails and what it takes to have that reliance on the divine rather than our materialistic world. And when he's ready, we will get there, and we'll have a nice theme of Umber Brahm speakers for the night. So just bear with us, and maybe we can sing a hymn in the meantime.
From heaven you came, helpless babe, entered our world, your glory veiled, not to be served, but to serve, and give our life that we might live. This is our God, the servant King. He calls us now to follow him and give our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant King. There in the garden of tears, my heavy load he chose to bear. His heart with sorrow was torn. Let not my will but yours, he said. This is our God, the servant King. He calls us now to follow him and give our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant King. Come see his hands and his feet, the scars that speak of sacrifice, hands that flung stars into space, to cruel nails surrendered. This is our God, the servant King. He calls us now to follow Him and give our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant King. So let us learn how to serve, and in our lives enthrone Him, each other's needs to prefer. For it is Christ we're serving. This is our God, the servant King. He calls us now to follow Him and give our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant King. All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. O seeker to me, Jesus, forget your hunger and thirst. Your food is the bread of life, and you drink from His wounded side. And you drink from His wounded side, and you drink from His wounded side. Your food is the bread of life, and you drink from His wounded. You traveler, forget the past, and you'll in the path. If you suffer on the road, remember for you He died. Remember for you He died. Remember for you He died. If you suffer on the road, remember for you He died. The trumpets will be heard. A great feast above the cloud, and a crown for the watchful, and a crown for the watchful, and a crown for the watchful. A great feast above the cloud. He'll prepare a place for you. He's always waiting for you. His heart is longing for you. Blessed are you if you are prepared. Blessed are you if you are prepared. Blessed are you if you are prepared. His heart is longing for you. Blessed are you if you are prepared. You're in Jesus Christ, you who live among the rock, have no fear from all dangers. You're protected by the You're protected by the Lord. You're protected by the Lord. Have no fears from all dangers. You're protected by the Lord.
So no, we're still not ready, but that's okay because I have exciting announcements for everyone. Well, just one really. St. Barb's Youth Camp is coming very fast. It is on the 19th to 21st of this month. And obviously we're getting quite close. There are limited spots. So get in while you can. I think we're keeping Reggio open for another week. It's going to be at Blue Gum Lodge in the Blue Mountains, so not too far, especially if you want to come for a day trip or just for a night. So I'll just run through a couple of things. If you want to stay for the full length, it's $150 from Friday to Sunday. For one night, Friday to Saturday, it's $100. One night, Saturday to Sunday is $130. Or if you want to just come for a day trip, it's $80 for the Saturday. So we'd love to see as many faces as possible there. I think a lot of people have already registered, but if you haven't and maybe you want some more information, come and see any of the youth servants and we can help you out with that. But otherwise, the link is in our bio, so there should be no issues accessing that. And the youth team have worked very hard to produce what we think is a great 3-day activity and set of activities and talks. So it should be very interesting. There will also be, a little surprise, so a bit of incentive if you didn't already have any, to come and show your face at the youth camp. Besides that, I don't think there's anything to add. Good? Okay. Maybe just speak among yourselves for the next couple of minutes. Yes, the link is on Instagram, St. Barb's Youth, if you don't already follow our page. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to cut the chit-chat short. Sorry, guys. Can we please welcome Abuna Paul, who's going to take us through Devine Reliance.
In the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We're able to get the... So I was asked to talk about relying on God and specifically using Elijah as our example. So I thought to do like an Elijah character study, and then we'll take a bunch of lessons from Elijah's life, including relying on God, because it's a big part of it, but we'll take some other lessons as we go along as well, if that's okay. So thank you for having me. It's wonderful to see you all in person, face to face. It's been a long time, and it's really nice to see the church alive again. So we'll start just with a quick overview of the Old Testament, just so we can know where Elijah fits into the grand scheme of things. So you have creation, roughly set about 4,000 years before Christ. A huge flood soon after that God keeps starting again with humanity, because humanity keeps falling away from the purpose of God, so then God starts again. So he kills everyone, starts again with Noah. And then the people start to become corrupt again, so he starts again with Abraham. And then the people, he wants to separate them out as a nation from Egypt, so that they're in a little separate land. He takes Joseph and he starts again, and then they go around the desert for a very long time until the generation of people that didn't trust in God died off, and then he starts again in the promised land. And then he keeps trying to start again with these judges, and then when they fail, he puts a new judge, and then he lets them suffer, and then he puts a new judge, and it's this cycle that they keep going round and round. And then eventually the people say, we want our own king. And then God says, fine, you can have a king, and they reject the prophets, and they reject God, and they say, give us a king. So then there's a series of kings. This is the period of history that Elijah comes in, during this period of the kings. That's when the prophets, most of the prophets you'll find are there, and they're there to service or to guide the kings from making mistakes. The kings is two kingdoms, and they split up from one another. The northern kingdom is all bad kings. They eventually get decimated by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom eventually also breaks down. There's a few good kings, and they're also taken into exile. And then they're returned. They build the temple again, and then that's when you have Second Temple Judaism, and they're the Jews that then continued through to the time of Christ. So that's the general gist of biblical history up to the time of Christ. And so you have Elijah is a person that is talking to the kings, okay? So I just wanted to give you that context. Elijah's name means Eli Yah, right? God, Yah. My God is Yahweh. That's what the name means. My God is Yahweh, and that defines his personality. So his whole personality is focused, as dedicated to this God, Yahweh, which is the God of the Old Testament. That's what his name means. And he comes to eventually represent all of the prophets. So he's like the prototype of all the prophets, this guy this guy Elijah. And his focus point is that my God is Yahweh. That's why I worship, that's why I follow, that's why I listen to. I focus on nothing else except the fact that this is my God. So that's Elijah. We don't know much about his early life. Okay, so he comes onto the scene very, very suddenly, so we don't know anything about when he's young. There is some talk in the Jewish tradition that he was like a priest, but which tribe he was from is not known or documented. He's from the land of Tishb, of the land of Gilead, and it's too vague to make any real conclusions about. Okay, so we just know that he's Elijah the Tishbite. Okay, but we don't know much about him from that information. So he was a prophet. I said to you that the kingdom of Israel split into two kingdoms at that time, the northern and the southern. The northern was a very bad kingdom. Okay, there was not one good king came out of the northern kingdom. And that was the context in which Elijah served. So Elijah served God when the place was a mess. He couldn't find one good king. And to add to that, he was during the time of Ahab the king. Okay? So I'm going to read to you from 1 Kings chapter 16 to give you the context of what Elijah was serving in. Now Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all those who were before him. And it came to pass, as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took as wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him. Then he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a wooden image, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. Okay, so I want to read that last part again. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. So Elijah's context is a bad context. He has a very, very tough job. His job is to service the worst king of Israel. The king that does the most against God. And his whole purpose is, my God is Yahweh, to make the people worship God. So he's got a very, very hard task. So the first thing about Elijah is to understand that all of us, as we serve God or we move through this life, that sometimes it's in the most difficult circumstances that the most glory comes. So Elijah, as I said, became the prototype of all the prophets, partly because he dealt with the most difficult circumstances. Buna Paula just sent a message today, actually, from C.S. Lewis. He said, if I can find it, hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. So Elijah had hardships, and therefore he had an extraordinary. So that's the context of Elijah. So Elijah then enters into the kings very suddenly. He explodes onto the scene in the context of this Ahab and Jezebel. Sorry, I didn't comment on Jezebel. Jezebel is like the wicked witch, you know, like if you ever read Narnia or anything like that, you know, that white witch that makes Edmund eat Turkish delight, you know, that witch? That's Jezebel. You know, she's wicked witch. Everything about her is bad. As we go through the story, she makes everyone around her do toxic things. And so she's actually the main antagonist in the story against Elijah, more than Ahab even. So in the context of this horrible king and queen and this kingdom that's going down the gurgler, Elijah explodes onto the scene in 1 Kings chapter 17. So it says, "And Elijah the Tishbite of the inhabitants of Gilead said to Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years except at my word." So the first thing he does, he explodes onto the scene and he says there's not going to be rain on this land, okay, which is a disaster for the land, okay? It will cause famine and death and destruction and poverty, and it can destroy a whole kingdom. It makes them very weak, and other kingdoms can come and take them over. So that's what Elijah does. He comes and says, you're not going to have any rain on your land. So the first lesson, I want to go through a few lessons as we go, as I said before. The first lesson is that the beginnings of Elijah's life are quiet. He has a quiet life. He's non-existent. He's out in the desert with God, doing something or other. As far as we know, this guy Elijah was not married. He was a celibate. He was just someone dedicated his life to God. And he just lived a quiet life where he was allowed to experience God. He wasn't after glory. He wasn't after honor. He wasn't after trying to show himself off. He just wanted to live quietly with God until God was ready to use him. To be able to be used by the hand of God, to be able to be ready to do what God needs you to do in certain settings at the right time in your life, you have to live a quiet life with God. You have to be in obscurity. All the saints tried as much as possible to live in obscurity. They didn't try to make a name for themselves, to honor themselves. You know, St. Paul in the Pauline epistle today, is that he said that some people see serving God as a means of gain, as if I could put myself over other people by serving God. But that was not Elijah's nature or character. And it's the same for some other saints. For example, Elijah, John the Baptist, everyone compared him to Elijah because John the Baptist's style was exactly the same. He lived a quiet, peaceful life on his own, celibate, honest, praying to God. When God wanted him to do something, he wanted him to rebuke Herod, he wanted him to take on, the king at the time, then he did the work and he got himself killed. And he had all the courage in the world, but that had nothing to do with the quiet life. And he was only ready to do that through his humility, through his connection to God, through all that time that he spent in quietness. Same as Pope Kyrillos. Pope Kyrillos spent many years in quietness, in solitude. And then when God was ready to transform the whole Coptic church, he used the guy who was in obscurity. So the church was in not the best state when Pope Kyrillos became Pope. But God then chose that quiet guy who had a connection with him from the windmill and from where he used to live in an isolation, and said, come and serve. And so the first lesson is, if we want to serve God, then we have to have, as much as possible, a quiet life with God. We have to have some time in obscurity. We have to really try and seek just the quietness of hearing his voice, which we'll see later when Elijah recognized the quiet voice of God when he was on the mountain. We'll get there in a minute. So then he comes out and says, there's going to be no rain, no dew, no nothing. You're going to be in famine. And of course, God protects him. So God then takes Elijah and puts him next to a brook, so a flowing stream. So he has an unlimited supply of water, and he gets these ravens to come and drop him off some bread. And then when the water runs dry, Elijah is sent to the widow in Zaraphat. Okay, before we read any further, I want to ask a question. So he's sent to this widow of Zaraphat, and she kind of feeds him and looks after him. Why is that relevant to today? Does anyone know how that is relevant to today? Because today we read something that should, you guys should all be paying attention and noticing the connections, in the Bible. So does anyone know what's the connection between what Elijah did and what we read today? I'll give you a hint, it was the gospel of today. Anyone got any idea? What was the gospel of today? Anyone hear Abuna's sermon? Did you hear a sermon, Abuna? What was the gospel? Someone? Good, very good. And so the widow of Nain and the raising of her son is directly parallel to this story. And St. Luke actually points to this story when he's telling that story, and he uses very common language between the two stories. It's a point of education, not much to do with what we're trying to say today. But it does. Elijah became a type of Christ in a sense. He foreshadowed the miracle that Christ was going to do later. So Elijah goes to the widow in Zaraphat. Zaraphat being a Gentile. So we'll focus on that in a little bit. And so I won't focus on this right now, but basically God protects him. He goes and drinks from this, and then the ravens come, and then he gets this widow to look after him. And then the widow who's looking after him, her son dies, as I said, and Elijah is filled with compassion in the same way that Christ is filled with compassion in today's gospel. And he then prays to God for the boy, okay? And then he raises the boy. And so the second lesson we'll learn, which is again the same lesson that we learn from Christ in the gospel today, is that we are meant to have compassion on the people around us, and it's meant to move us to action. It's meant to move us to pray for them. So we have to really be careful of our spiritual lives if we find that we don't really pray for anyone around us, that all we focus on is our difficulties. The topic today is trying to deal with, deal with difficulties. What was the topic? I'll get it exactly. Relying on God when things are not really moving that well in my life. But sometimes we shouldn't be just focusing on what's not going well in my life, but perhaps what's going on in other people's lives, and praying for them. And so there's a very important part of the spiritual life is to pray for others, to look to others, to care for others. Elijah had compassion on this lady who looked after him, and therefore he prayed, and the boy came to life. And then Elijah waits for a long time with this famine that's happening in the land, and people are dying, and Elijah is just expected to wait in this obscurity. And then after a long time, 1 Kings 18 says, "And it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth." And so all this time, that Elijah is waiting. He's seeing the people suffering. He's seeing that he's hated by the kings. He's seeing that things are, it's getting worse for him. The poor lady's running out of food and her son's dying and there's a big mess happening in the world. But Elijah is patient. He's been commanded by God that there's not to be rain, and so he just waits on God. He sits and waits. And so sometimes we have to be very patient for the things we want from God. We just have to wait. Sometimes there's no other option. And while you wait in prayer. You wait in thanksgiving. Eventually, God will always answer your prayer. God will never leave you without answering your prayer one way or another. He will give you the peace that you want. He will give you the comfort that you want. But sometimes you just have to be patient. You have to wait on God. Elijah was patient, and then eventually God said, go, and so he went. And then he goes back, and he wants to prove that God is God. Okay, so he's going to go and resolve the problem for the people of Israel. But he wants to prove God is God. And it's a really famous story that happens in 1 Kings. And so he said and he didn't like the fact that people are torn between serving God and serving Baal, serving God and serving Baal. It's the kind of the problem that we all have. Have fun, serve God. Drink, serve God. Sexual purity, serve God. Come to church, go out. It's this back and forth that we struggle with, especially as young people, deciding, faltering, the way that he says it here, faltering between two opinions. You have the opinion of God, you have the opinion of the world, and we just sit there going back, swinging like a pendulum between the two. And so Elijah said to them, Elijah came to all the people and said, how long will you falter between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal, follow him. But the people answered him not a word. And so he's challenging them to choose, to make a decision. We said before that Elijah's name means, my God is Yah. That's a decision. It defined his personality. I have a God. He's asking me to do certain things. Can I make the choice to do what he asks me to do without constantly faltering? And part of the problem with this faltering, with going back and forth, God understands our weakness. He understands the difficulties of society that we live in. He understands that we struggle. But the problem is for us that as long as I'm struggling between the two sides, I will be restless. I will be agitated. I will not be happy one way or another. I will choose the things away from God, and I'll be guilty and disturbed and frustrated. I'll come to the church and I'll long for the things outside. And I'll just constantly be restless, uncomfortable, agitated, because I haven't made my decision. As young people, that decision must be made. There is no way around it. The decision must be made, and I must follow my decision. I must carry it through to its conclusion. It's not necessarily an easy decision, but it's a supported decision. When I choose God, it is a supported decision. It's a proven decision. And we'll see in a minute. So he doesn't just challenge them. He challenges them and then he proves it. But he just says, it's going to take sacrifice and you've got to work this way. And that's the way I can be settled in my heart. I can, be sure of the steps that I take in life. I can be relaxed in my decision making. If I just choose something, have focus, as Chris said, grit, you just keep going towards a task. I missed the rest of the talk part. I got the beginning part. So that idea of I make a decision and I follow my decision. So he says to them, how long are you going to falter? If you're going to follow the world, I'm not telling anyone to go follow the world if that's your decision, but he says if you're going to follow Baal, if he's God, go for it. But if it's God, then shouldn't you follow? Shouldn't you have a bit more integrity in your decisions? And so it's the same for us, that we have to have integrity in our decisions. And so Elijah then goes on to mock the god of Baal. Okay? And so it was at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, cry aloud, for he is a god. So they all cut themselves, they're trying to call on God. So he got 2 offerings and he said, whoever's fire comes down, that's the one that is a real God. And so he says to them, call on Baal and see if he's going to send some fire down. And they're cutting themselves, they're praying, they're doing all sorts of stuff. Nothing happens, of course. And so Elijah starts to mock and says, cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is meditating, or he is busy, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he is sleeping and must be awakened. And so he's mocking them. You know, one of them, he is busy, I think, or he's busy. In Hebrew, I think actually means he's off going to the toilet, you know. So he's saying he's either asleep, can't hear you, maybe you need to be a bit louder. He's mocking them. And you see the courage of this man. He's one against many. The king wants to kill him, and he's mocking them. You know, you look at the boldness and the courage that comes with serving God, with making that decision. You serve God, you'll have a boldness, you have a courage that is not really necessarily your personality. Because we all have different personalities. Some people very tough and ready to fight with anyone, other people very shy and timid. But the boldness that comes with serving God is independent of that. It's because I have an assurance of who I follow. I have the truth behind me. You think about the blind man in John's Gospel who took on the Sanhedrin and sacrificed everything once he got his eyes back. He had a boldness, a courage, a confidence because he knew his decision. It's a focus. I know exactly what I'm working for. I believe in it, and I will carry it all the way to the end. I don't mince my words. I know exactly where I'm going. And so he mocks them. And then, of course, when nothing happens, he adds water to his one and adds heaps of water, and then he prays, and God comes and licks it all up with his fire, and he gets all the Baal prophets killed. And then, after that's all happened, still there's no rain. Elijah then has a task. He has to then move God's heart to make the place rain. So then Elijah goes off to the side and he prays. Elijah went up to the top of Carmel. Then he bowed down on the ground and put his face between his knees and said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. So Elijah puts himself in the prayer position and he goes, go up and look, and then there's nothing. And then he says, go up and look again. And he's praying all the while. Who's he praying for? He's praying for his enemies. These people want to kill him. And they will again want to kill him. Yet he goes and he prays for them. So again, as I said to you before, that we have to pray for the people around us, even our enemies. Even St. Isaac the Syrian, I was reading something that he said that a compassionate heart will pray for everyone, even those who cause us harm. In fact, that's the trick to dealing with people that you're struggling with, is to pray for them honestly, not to pray that God brings fire down and consumes them and all that kind of stuff. But you pray that God would give them peace in their heart, would give them joy in their heart, would give them love in their heart, would make them successful so that any feeling of envy between us is gone and that kind of thing. That's what prayer is for, especially my enemies. So he prays, and of course the rains come and the people are saved from their problem. And then God lifts him up, and then Ahab and Jezebel are going to meet somewhere, and suddenly Elijah's there before them. You know, imagine how frustrating this guy is for them, that everything he does just confounds them. Everything. So he gets there before them. And of course, the wicked Jezebel, we said the wicked queen, you know, the thorn in everyone's flesh in this story, she wants to kill Elijah. She doesn't like the fact that she's been humiliated in this way. So she is very unhappy that all the Baals have been killed and seeks to have Elijah killed. And this gets Elijah down. And this kind of brings us to a lot of what this story is about today, about this topic, this idea that Elijah, in spite of all of that, at this moment has kind of like a downhearted moment. Like he's just had enough. He's been in exile, he's done all these miracles, still no one believes him, they still want to kill him, you know, and he's just had enough. And, you know, the Bible says that he was downcast, he was sad, he said, kill me now, I'd rather be dead than deal with this anymore. And then, of course, in this lowest moment of Elijah's life, actually he has the most glory. He has the most unique experience of his life is in this moment. So he's very sad, and then an angel comes to him and gives him 2 cakes. So the Bible describes 2 cakes maybe a bit bigger, who knows what size they were, and then he eats them, and then he lives on that for 40 days and 40 nights, and he climbs up the mountain. And that mountain, as he climbs up, is where he gets an encounter with God. And so the next lesson, was 2 lessons in that. Number 1 is, even if you're downhearted, remember Elijah. Remember that even Elijah, mighty Elijah, had a moment where he was a bit confused about the purpose of God, what his purpose is. How come all this has happened and still they won't kill me? Still, I'm getting nowhere. There's no fruit here. It's a waste of time. There's no one else good around. And I can't deal with it anymore. But it's in, the biggest challenges of your life is where God is most mighty. You don't really get to experience the full strength of God except in difficulty. And that's the reality, because when things are going well, we tend to forget God. We tend to rely on ourselves. But when things are a disaster, that's when God shows his hand and shows his might. The second thing is, understand the power of fasting in this setting. That God is about to encounter with Elijah. He's about to show him himself. So for Elijah to be worthy or able or capable of dealing with God in that setting, he had to fast 40 days and 40 nights. So to encounter God, he had to fast. So God gave him those 2 cakes and said, fast 40 days, 40 nights, and he fasted. And we'll see later that Ahab was saved by his humility and his fasting as well, because he was about to get killed by God as well. So then Elijah climbs the mountain, and then he encounters God, on the mountain. And it's a famous story. Does everyone know the story? So Elijah was waiting for God, and where was God? Someone tell me where God was. It's on the screen, but don't look. Where was God? Was he in the mountain? Was he in the thunder? Was he in the mighty wind? What was it? Someone. Such a famous story. Tells us so much about God. What? The still small voice. Yeah, so there's all this mighty rushing wind, and there's a big storm and hurricane and all this stuff, and God was not in them, the Bible says. But then God was in the still small voice. It tells you so much about God, that he is quiet, meek, gentle. He's not aggressive, trying to show his power, and no, he's a still quiet voice. And so the lesson is that, especially in hardship, we have to go to quietness. We have to go to our inner life to hear the voice of God. You have to start to fast, you pray, you move away from the world, and you ask God to talk to you. And that's where God will talk to you. You open your Bible, you pray. Some priests, when they're really struggling, with something, they'll rush off to the monastery, and they'll just need to be with God for a little bit to hear the voice of God. Because God is in the quietness. God is meek. God is gentle. He is a quiet voice. If you are trying to resolve your own problems, if you're in the midst of noise and people and social, then you will not hear the voice of God. That's not how God operates. He's not going to force himself through all that noise and say, listen, I need you to stop doing that, or I need you to start doing that. It's just not going to happen. What God will do is you pull yourself away, and he'll come to you and say, yes, this is correct, do this or do that, or change your tack. So you have to listen for the voice of God through all the noise in your life. And then once he's up there on the mountain, as I said, he was very downcast and disheartened, and God appeared to him, and he was a still small voice. And then he started to speak to God and said, well, I'm not happy. There's no one left serving you except me, and I've had enough. And that was his main issue. His main issue was that I'm the only one left. There's no one good. All this work that's been happening, and there's no one good left in the world except me. And he feels that he's been rejected, and that the work of God is doomed. It's doomed. Just like, yes, I can do all these miracles, but the people don't care. And so that really disturbs him. And often we feel the same way, especially if you watch a lot of the news, or media. It surprises me the way Hollywood portrays the USA. The USA is portrayed as like a very secular, very anti-religious place. But it's not. It's probably the most religious country in the world. If you statistically, they have more people attending church than any other country in the world almost. Like almost 30% will attend church every couple of weeks or something like that. There's no other country that has that kind of data. Yet, if you just growing up watching stuff on TV and whatever, the Hollywood, the impression it gives you of America, it makes you believe there's not one good human being in the place. There's not a church in the whole of the country. And it's nonsense. It's not true. And it's the same across the world. It's the same across the world. There is people who serve God honestly everywhere in the world. But the delusion is that everything is bad. And especially in times like this, because of the COVID and the financial and all these other things that are happening in the world, the delusion is that everything's bad, with doom and gloom, but that's not the reality. It's a lie of the devil. It's a lie of the devil. So God says to Elijah's main problem is that there's no one serving him, right? And then God says to him, hold on, that's a lie. That is absolutely not true. He says, God is saying to him, yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him. So God is saying to Elijah that you thought you were the only one, but there's 7,000 people there that have not yet served Baal, that are serving God. Elijah just wasn't aware of them. And so there is many, many good people in the world. There is many people serving God. And it's a lie of the devil that there's no one good left in the world. It's not true. There is many, and there's many people serving God. And then he also resolves Elijah's problem that he gives him Elisha. He says, all right, you're done. You're like checking out and you're tired. Well, we'll give you an apprentice who can serve with you, and he gives him Elisha. He also gives him one other thing to do, which we'll talk about a bit later, but on his way back. So we take a lot of hope in this idea that there's still many people, many good people in the world. Many people who serve God honestly, not just within our culture, by the way. It's not just the Coptic Orthodox who serve God. There is lots of people in the world that serve God honestly, that are reserved for God. So again, Elijah has a bit of a break from Ahab and Jezebel and her wily schemes, and then eventually Jezebel starts to get back to her old tricks. And she wants to, Ahab wants a certain patch of land. This guy Naboth owns it, and he doesn't know what to do. And he comes home really upset. Have you read the story? He comes home really upset, and his wife says to him, why are you upset? What's going on? And he says, I'm so sad. I asked him for his land, and he said no. And she said, what? My husband crying? Isn't my husband the king? Shouldn't my husband kill the man that does this? And and she riles him up. The horrible wife riling him up to fight. And he's like, all empowered because his wife said to him, the Ragal says go and fight. So he goes and she gets the guy killed. And she kills the man and takes his land and gives it to the king, as if the king didn't have enough land. And this, of course, displeases God. This displeases God in taking what is not theirs. And so God pronounces judgment on Ahab for this, and Jezebel. He pronounces judgment. And I want you to look at the gentleness of God in this scene. They have done something wicked. They've done something very bad, Ahab and Jezebel, for no good reason. They've had all the money in the world, and God is unhappy with them. Okay? So 1 Kings 21. But there was no one, again, reiterating how bad Ahab was. But there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do wickedness in the sight of the Lord, because Jezebel, his wife, stirred him up. And he behaved very abominably in following idols, according to all that the Amorites had done, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. So it was, when Ahab heard those words, that he tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his body, and fasted and lay in sackcloth, and went about mourning. So Ahab, this wicked king, humbles himself in front of God. He's doomed to the judgment of God. And so he fasted and lay in sackcloth. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, see how Ahab has humbled himself before me. Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring calamity in his days. In the days of his son, I will bring the calamity on his house. So you see again the gentleness of God. And you see again the power of the idea of fasting in humility in front of God. There is a strong power in fasting. That's why we fast so much in the church. And so Ahab humbles himself. God lifts the rebuke from Ahab. Eventually Ahab dies. He has a son called Ahaziah, because Elijah's story continues a little bit. And this guy Ahaziah, he falls through a roof. It says he falls through a lattice or something like that, and he falls and he injures himself. And he's in a bed, injured. And he says he'd like God to heal him, but he sends to the prophets of Baal instead of to God. He asks them, will I be healed? And on the way, Elijah stops them and says, is there no God in Israel that you're going to go to the Baals instead of coming to me? How dare you go elsewhere than to come to God? And he says sorry. He sends these 50 men to Elijah. Elijah consumes them with fire. Sends another 50 men. Elijah consumes them with fire. And then eventually Elijah comes and says, no. God said, no, you're not going to be healed because you didn't come to me. And that's the punishment fulfilled that was prophesied about his father. Okay. Of course, Ahaziah had the chance not to be punished in that way, but he didn't fulfill what he should have done. So, again, the lesson there is remember to turn to God. When you have a problem, when things are tough, turn to God. Sometimes it seems like the last place to turn when I'm really struggling, when I'm really frustrated, when I'm downcast, when I'm sad, when I feel rejected. Turn to God. Don't turn to other things. Again, I caught the beginning of Chris's talk. It was about anxiety. He said anxiety, and how do we treat anxiety in society? What do people do? They turn to drugs, screens, addictions. They deal with their mental health issues in the wrong way. They deal with their physical illnesses the wrong way. They deal with their problems in the wrong way. Whereas you're meant to do it the right way. And when you turn to the wrong way, you're actually rejecting God. Because God could help you. He says to him, is there no God that could help you with your problem, that you would go to that? You do the wrong thing. It's like a decompensation. So we be careful of turning to the wrong things at those times in our lives when we need help. When you need, turn to God. That's the lesson there. Because it may be too late by the time you decide you want to turn to God. Of course, it's never too late to turn to God, but you know what I mean. Elijah, then, Elisha is now following Elijah around. Elijah is taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. Elisha requests that he has double the spirit of Elijah. He does end up getting double the spirit of Elijah. Does anyone know how that's proven in the Bible? Again, it's another famous anecdote from the Bible. Good, excellent. Yeah, so there's all the same miracles, but it's double of them. So he does double the miracles of Elijah. So we'll just finish with just some of a few extra little points about Elijah. Then I'll open it up to questions if anyone has anything to ask, and then we'll call it a night. So again, I said to you when Elijah was on the mountain and God was comforting him, there was one other thing that God requested Elijah to do on his way back. So he said, on your way back to dealing with Ahab, I want you to go through the Syrian king. The Syrian king is not a Jew. Nothing to do with the Jewish nation. Nothing to do, as far as we're concerned, with the line of salvation. You got this line of salvation that runs through the Old Testament, leading up to Christ. And so the Syrian king has nothing to do with that. And we said that Elijah was a prophet to the northern kingdom, nothing to do with Syria. But he asks him to go to the Syrian king and anoint the king of Syria. It's a really interesting aside. Like, what has Elijah got to do with the king of Assyria? He's got a focus point on the children of Israel. And the Bible has a focus point on the Israel line to get to Christ. So why does he anoint the king of Syria? I think it just gives us an insight into the heart of God, that God was always the God of everyone. In the Bible, we see the line of Israel, because that's the line of salvation. That's the story of salvation. But God has always cared about everyone. And we would do really well to remember that concept, that God is not the God of a specific people. He's the God of all people. He used a specific people to save all the nations. Again, he was there. He was a prophet for the northern kingdom, but he'd write letters to the southern kingdom. We said that he stayed with Zaraphat. So he was a multicultural prophet. He served all sorts of cultures. His legacy, he ended up becoming prime amongst all the prophets. In the New Testament, when Jesus asks who people say that he is, so he says, "Who do people say that I am?" They said, "Some say Elijah." So he became like the prototype of what a prophet should be. So when the people thought that he was a wonderful prophet, they said, "Oh, he must be like Elijah." And Elijah went up in a chariot of fire. He must be him. And he came to represent all of the prophets in the same way that Moses represented all of the law. So in the Transfiguration, who are the two people that turn up next to Christ at the Transfiguration? Who is it? Moses and Elijah. And what's one of the main reasons why they're the two specific people there that day? Because they represent the law and the prophets, and who is greater than the law and the prophets? Is Christ. And that's the whole point, and that's why they're there at that Transfiguration scene. And so in Malachi, this is the Old Testament, making the same point. "Remember the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse." So the law and the prophets are what the people of Israel are meant to be following, and then Christ comes and fulfills both the law and the prophets. So that's the story of Elijah, and that's some lessons on relying on God all throughout your life, through hardship, through difficulties, through successes, through everything. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they would like to add, or Abuna, if you just want to add something? Thank you for listening to me, guys.
Thank you, Abuna. That was great. Just a few announcements, as long as there's no questions, definitely. Last call. No questions? Okay. So in case you missed my elaborate announcement, camp is coming up in 2 weeks. If you still haven't registered and you'd like to, please get in quick. There's only a few spots left, and you can ask any of the servants about that. If you need any more information about any of our services here at St. Barb's, you can follow our Instagram at St. Barb's Youth. In terms of, weekly services, we have a Monday night book club, which runs at 7:45 on Zoom. So it means if, you have a busy working week, you can still find time to tune in. We're doing Learning to Pray by Anthony Bloom, and I hear we're up to chapter 4, which is a short one. So it's not too late to catch up if you'd like to, and you can ask any of the servants about that as well. We also have a Wednesday night Bible study at 7:30 in the church, and we're doing the book of Romans, and I believe we're also covering a bit of the wisdom of Sirach each week. As well as that, there is no youth meeting for the next 2 weeks, the second week being the camp. As well as that, we have some exciting news that there's no more booking for masses. So if you're unsure of our weekly liturgies, we have Wednesday from 9 to 11, Friday 5:45 to 7:30, Saturday 9 to 11, and Sunday there's an English and an Arabic from 8 to 10:30. Is there any other announcements from anyone? No? Okay, can we please just move in to take a photo, please? I don't know if it's going to be too much of a challenge to everyone put a mask on. Does everyone have a mask? Are you sure? No, I did get masks last week. Did you actually? Yeah. You posted it with masks.
Doesn't matter. Alright, I'm going to take it with this special filter.
If you don't have one, it's okay. We'll just let it slide this week. But can we move in? Chris, Sonia and stuff, can you move this way?
I mean,
Not everyone has one. Doesn't matter. You're taking a photo.
I'll put masks on too.
Yeah, you can do that. She was going to Photoshop them, even.
I'm putting on social media. I have to.
Anyone who's in that side room as well, could you move in? No? Okay. Take it.
It was like preface to bring a mask. Right, say 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Big smile.
Very nice.
Amazing. Can we please stand up to pray?
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We thank our Father and King for giving us this opportunity to come and stand together. We appreciate so much, Lord, that we have this chance for fellowship, and we ask you, Lord, to help us to enjoy it, help us to use it for the glory of your name, to make our way to your kingdom. We ask you, especially tonight, to help us to learn from your heroes in the Bible and learn from the people that pleased you in the Bible and the way you interacted with them, and help us to understand how to deal with you, Lord, how to understand you, how to move towards you, how to draw comfort from you, how to rely on you through all stages of our lives. Because we know, Lord, that you are there. You, even if we can't hear your voice, you are a voice next to us, a small voice next to us, guiding us through our lives and comforting us. And help us to understand that, Lord, and to count on you. Amen. Through the intercessions of all your holy saints, above all the Holy Mother of God, the Virgin Saint Mary, hear us when we cry to you, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven,